Hi, I'm Jackson. I'm from the Critical Communications World Series. I'm here today at the EE head office in Paddington, and I'm joined with Mr. Mansoor Hanif, Director of Radio Access Networks for EE. And we're going to be talking today about some of the key topics and issues in the industry. So obviously, Mansoor, EE is going to be heading up the Emergency Services Network in the UK. During the tender process, what made this project so enticing for EE to step in and be a part of?
Well, it was quite a long tender process, so I think we were enticed from the beginning. But the reason why I think we were enticed is that this was an opportunity to bring forward what we really believe in, which is our network, to the service of the country. And I think the whole idea of bringing a private critical communications network over a mainstream commercial network enticed us from the very beginning, because we obviously believe in the strength of our network, and we felt this was the perfect opportunity to offer more services over it.
Fantastic. And for you, from a commercial operator perspective, what are the benefits to the end user that they're going to have with having an emergency services network run by a commercial operator?
Well, I think the benefits are that, especially within EE, we've been known from the beginning, since we were born, as being really passionate about innovation. So we're rolling out the best technologies over 4G, now 4G plus, LTE advanced, bringing faster and faster speeds and new innovation such as VoLTE, voice over Wi-Fi, to the UK much earlier than before. And that's always been our ambition. So I think the advantage to the end users, especially the emergency services users, is that now they will be, by using this really advanced network, they will have the most advanced tools in the world. And I think that's a big advantage, because I think we do a lot of work with the security services part of our BAU job, and we'd found recently that they were struggling a little bit to keep up with the technology advances. If they're still using Tetra, which is a fantastic technology, but it is 20 years old, we feel there was an imbalance between the good guys and the bad guys, to put it simply. And I think by giving them access to the latest technologies through our network, we'll be able to right that balance and make sure the good guys are ahead of the bad guys for now and the future.
Fantastic. And this is obviously a huge project. What are some of the challenges that you faced along the way, and how have you worked to overcome these challenges?
Well, first of all, I would say it's not even a project, it's a massive program, and it's a program of programs. So we shouldn't underestimate the amount of work that is going on. And we haven't yet faced them all. We are in the middle of facing those challenges. So I don't want us to underestimate the amount of effort and work that is going into this, the preparation for the ESN cutover. And but we're very confident that we're going to get there. But I think the biggest challenges are simply the challenges of trying to map a service framework that's based on a small network. So I understand that the current airwave network is national, but it's only 3,500 roughly sites compared to 18,500 sites that we have. Trying to keep the same service levels in a transparent way, while mapping that over something which is totally different, is something. It's a journey for all of us. But I think we've done that mapping quite well. And now I think the way we're facing our challenges is that we started very early. A lot of what we need to do was already being done, and we're just having to accelerate it. And we're also innovating around the edges. So I think the biggest advantage we have in facing these challenges is that we have the team that built the fastest ever rollout of 4G probably in Europe. And we have the team that integrated the legacy Orange and T-Mobile networks at the same time. So we're used to running very massive programs in parallel, efficiently and successfully. And we're used to working with a lot of third-party organizations to deliver that. Those are the advantages. So we're relying on our strengths to overcome all of those challenges. But I think it's that mindset of the service framework of a dedicated network running over a commercial network, which can absolutely be done, but just kind of mapping those service elements has been the biggest challenge up to now.
Sure. And there has been some commercial operators around the world that have had a public safety network that's run over their networks, nowhere near the scale of the UK, but on a much smaller scale. Was there anything that you learned from other case studies from around the world or experiences that you took from other places?
We do. I mean, we try not to be arrogant, so we know we can always learn from many operators here and in the world. And we've actively reached out to the most advanced operators on 4G in the past, especially in Japan, Korea, and the US. While we were looking around in the emergency services space, we couldn't find anything similar to what we were planning to do here. So there was nowhere we could look to simply copy-paste solutions. So this isn't a copy-paste network. We are really going to pioneer. However, we did find some operators that are in a similar phase to us. So as far as we know, there is no large national commercial 4G network which will be running emergency services over that 4G network without any dedicated spectrum. The nearest we found was in Korea, where the Korean government is doing something very similar, except that they will be offering 10 megahertz of spectrum. So we reached out immediately to the Koreans, and we have, I can't reveal with who we have agreements in place, but we are closely cooperating where that's allowed, within the rules set by the Home Office and the authorities. So yes, we are actively cooperating with those operators who are very close to our stage of development. But frankly, I don't believe there is any operator who is exactly going to do it the way we are. And we have to rely on our team's knowledge and strengths and our willingness to innovate to make sure that we do the right thing. And I think it's going to be the way around as we go to the future. I think other operators will be coming to us once we're live to take learnings there. But wherever there are learnings to be taken on certain aspects of service, we are. And in particular, I think the user groups are a huge source of knowledge. They've been through a lot over the last 10, 15 years. And there's a huge amount of operational experience that we can learn from them. And that's really about best practice on the ground, in the field, when there's an incident, how to cut through the bureaucracy, how to cut through the SLAs and rise above that to do the right thing at the right time. And that's where we're very keen to engage with them with the guidance of the Home Office to learn from the user entities.
Sure, and you obviously mentioned that this is really a pioneering program. And do you think this then sets a precedent for other regions, for commercial operators, to potentially, open up a new sort of area for commercial operators?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't see any other future path to the one we're taking, and that's why I hugely admire that in the team behind this in the UK who have actually set the stall out to pioneer this, because it's so clearly the way to go in the future. Now, other countries will take faster or slower paths depending on their situation. They may have different variations depending on their own local environment and the way the spectrum is allocated, etc. But overall, I believe LTE is the most robust mobile network ever produced by the fertile imagination of mankind up till now. That's the way I see it anyway. And I'm just so impressed at the robustness and the reliability of the 4G network compared to another technology. Nothing's perfect, so it's still evolving, but it must be the bedrock for all future networks as we go ahead, and it will be the bedrock for 5G networks as we go ahead. So I think we've already been, it's very clear that we've already been approached by authorities around the world. We are regularly being approached by other operators, other governments, through the Home Office. We follow their guide on who we should share with and what stage, etc., because obviously much of what we're doing is quite confidential. But I'm totally convinced that as we move to the future, other operators, other countries will be following this path, and I think it's a fantastic opportunity, not just for EE or for our partners, but for the whole of the critical communications industry in the UK. I think what people need to understand is that this is an opportunity for everybody, that the UK will be leading the world once more. We haven't done so for a while on a critical technology, and the opportunity for the UK to lead and export knowledge, engineering, products, services around the world is massive. So it's something that we feel everybody in the UK should be getting behind and working together with us. And actually we really need that, because to do this properly we need the support of everybody in the UK industry to get behind this and make it happen. But I think it's in everybody's interest to do so.
Absolutely, yeah. And so when it was initially announced that the UK Home Office would be taking this approach, there were suggestions that maybe a commercial operator, it wasn't resilient or secure enough to hold a public safety network. What have EE done to ensure that the network will be secure and resilient?
We've done a lot. We are doing a lot, and we will be doing more. But I think the first thing was to dispel any myths, because if you talk generically about an operator, I understand the concerns, but not all operators are the same. Some are bigger than others, some have more spectrum than others, some have more sites than others. We compete ferociously on the strength and quality of networks. I mean, that's where the whole of the industry is today, on network differentiation. So frankly speaking, I would never have pushed for this contract, and my teams and the whole of EE would never have launched the bid if we weren't confident in the strength of the network. And now we are humble enough to understand that there are still a lot of issues today on the commercial network, and we've been on a journey over the last 4 years integrating our networks, and we're improving every single day. That journey is now being accelerated. So we know we're not perfect, we've got a lot to do, but we're very confident in the direction we've taken is the right one, and that we have the strength to take on this extra traffic. So the first thing is to dispel the myths. First of all, the best resiliency you can have is having more sites. So compared to 3,000 sites, we have about 18,500, and we're building around 500 or so. So 6 times more sites, 6 times more resiliency in most cases. Simple fact. Yeah, people forget that simple fact. That wouldn't be the same for any other network. So any other network that bid for this, or any other network around the world, needs to look at that ratio and say, is it right for them? It was right for us. Spectrum is another one. So the current network runs over 5 megahertz or less. We've got around 100 megahertz of 4G spectrum available on FTD plus extra on TDD. That's a ratio of 20 to 1. So we can offer 20 times more capacity in a very simplistic terms where we need to, in the pockets where we need to. So you can see that there's a big difference there. And again, if we didn't have the spectrum to give the capacity, if we didn't have the sites to give the coverage, we wouldn't have bid for this. But even that is not enough. So we knew that the new features that are coming through in the 3GPP standards are specifically designed for what they call LTE Advanced, LTE Pro. And that gives critical communication features such as cross prioritization, such as mission critical PTT. All of these we are going to be at the forefront of, and these are the features where even if our capacity and our coverage is not enough for an event, which can happen at any time and we're fully aware of, we can still prioritize efficiently end-to-end the emergency services traffic to make sure that they get the prioritization even when there is a shortage, because there will be some shortages. That's still not enough, so we're also working a lot on the resiliency of the network. The biggest issue we have today is power cuts. And traditionally, operators have just suffered and borne those power cuts. Now we're going to actively lobby to make sure that the regional electricity companies understand our needs and that we engage with them, and we make sure that we have a good engagement with the regional companies. We have power cuts every day, unfortunately. But we're also going to put out a lot more generators. We're going to put out fixed generators, which can last for several days, with a battery backup to manage the switchover. We're going to roll out mobile generators that can get there within 6 hours, and in those cases we'll have batteries that can last 6 to 8 hours. We're also putting in microwave resiliency. We're also putting in lease line resiliency. We're rolling out satellite backhaul. So when I say this is a program of programs, it's a program of programs. So there's a lot going on. We won't only rely on the CapEx aspects of the investment that's going in for the resiliency. We'll also put in processes to improve the way we handle incidents and make sure that we have, for example, generators need to be positioned in the right place to get there quickly when there's a storm coming in. They need to be the right side of the bridge if we think the bridge has a risk of going down, the right side of the tunnel if we think the tunnel is going to be blocked. We need to strengthen our flood defenses. This is what we're doing in the north of England. We're experimenting with balloon-based temporary systems in case of widespread flooding that can last for up to a month to provide temporary coverage. We're innovating wherever we can. So it's the CapEx investment on existing solutions. It's changing our mindset and the actual processes we're using. We're uplifting all our SLAs with our partners. And we're also lobbying the government to help us to have more powers to fix issues, because today, if a landlord doesn't play ball, even if we have 24-hour access in our contract, we don't have any means to enforce that. So if there's a fault impacting our customers today, we've got to negotiate. It takes time. Sometimes we can't get access, and that's not acceptable anymore. So we need more powers through the Electronic Communications Code to allow us to fix faults quickly when they happen and to enforce access when these are impacting our customer, and of course, especially the emergency services customers. So all of that is ongoing, and all of that is a lot of work. All of that is what makes us feel confident that we'll be able to provide a good service when the time comes.
Absolutely, and I think there's a huge spotlight on public safety at the moment, not just in the UK but globally, due to disasters going on in different regions. Obviously, a key case study of that fairly close to home was obviously the incidents in Brussels, and it was highlighted that the commercial networks at that time were overrun due to the fact that there were so many people trying to use it. If worst case scenario, something happens like that in the UK, what will happen for EE in terms of how will you ensure that a similar problem doesn't happen here?
I think it's a very good case, and I think there's a lot of learnings that we can all take from that. My understanding, and I don't have confidential information, but my understanding from the high-level information I have is that all networks suffered, including the emergency services network there, and that the only way to communicate was over messaging in some cases. Now, it's an interesting case because it was an extreme case, not so much the incident itself, but the fact that all transport was blocked, and therefore people were stuck in the street without, the whole of the population of Brussels were stuck pretty much, and all they could do was call. And therefore, that's what broke down the networks. And I think it's very similar to what happened here in 2007. And I think there were learnings from that as well, which also led to the adoption of the Tetra network on a wider scale. So I think the learnings, first of all, is obviously what I said before, having the right capacity in the right places, having a proper prioritization, which can work. Now, one thing we have to remember is that we have a 4G network. We have various layers of 4G network. We have the 1800 layer, 2600 layer, 800 layer, and we're rolling out more layers in 2600. So it's already a much more robust network than we're used to in the past for capacity purposes. Secondly, the 3G network and the 2G network is not part of the emergency services network. So our normal customers would have access to the 3G network and the 2G network at all times, even if we were prioritizing most of the capacity or some of the capacity for the emergency service user on the 4G network. That's important to understand. For us, the 3G network and 2G network is just a backup to the emergency service network, and it is available to the rest of our customers. So that's why we should have capacity for the majority of cases. Now, clearly in an incident like Brussels, we would have congestion, but that's where the prioritization features come into play, which are not available today. We're not available in Brussels. And those features are most advanced over 4G networks. And that's why we feel that even in a critical situation such as what happened a few months ago in Brussels, we would still be able to prioritize the emergency services traffic by giving them that end-to-end prioritization embedded in the system under any circumstances of congestion. That's why we feel that, today our network would suffer, but tomorrow, and it really is tomorrow because we're experimenting this year with these features end-to-end. By the time we go live, we're confident that we'll have those prioritization features ready to go when we need to. And there'll be a lot of tests to make sure that they are working properly before we actually go live.
Sure. And obviously, the 4G network offers a range of different services and options for its users. But for you, for public safety, what's going to be the killer app for public safety LTE?
Well, there's two different things. One is for public safety LTE, and the other thing is for critical communications as a spin-off of that towards the business and industrial market. So in terms of public safety itself, obviously that prioritization is going to be absolutely key. And that's going to be the key to making sure that we can run over the commercial networks, as I've just been explaining earlier. But on top of that, having the capability to have a huge area of rich video services is, I think, going to change the game completely. So I believe we are experimenting already with edge computing and augmented reality. So apart from simple things like being able to do push-to-talk over video, which can be hugely of help to, for example, the fire service or search and rescue, it's going to save people's lives. It's going to make them much more efficient in saving people. Having that video content available live is going to be key. But above that, augmented reality, and in a lot of other industrial spaces over 4G networks, people are already using adapted Google specs to be able to add information in real time to a technician while he's in a critical situation, is again going to make them much more efficient, make them much more rapid in deployment, and save time and ultimately save people's lives. So video, but also augmented reality, having information made very clearly available simply to the search and rescue teams and especially the fire crews is going to be absolutely key in my view. Video obviously is a baseline that's going to be of great help. Also being able to record video and play it back, in case of detecting criminals and investigations is going to be of huge help there. But I think there's a lot of people in the industry who fully understand that. You don't need me to explain. What I'm interested in the following years after we go live is the application to industrial networks, because having a prioritization capability on a second tier available for industrials and businesses means that today they won't have to build dedicated networks otherwise, because we could offer them services with mission critical parameters. And for example, connected cars or connected machines, they can, if we can provide mission critical command and control communications through our overlay, our main network on a national basis, it would change the game for a lot of industrial companies and a lot of innovative companies, because they can be guaranteed of getting through to their machines in practically real time. That, together with device-to-device communications, which is a part of what we will be providing, not immediately, but very soon. I think device-to-device over 4G for commercial networks or B2B networks will open up a whole new world of applications and also allow us to increase our coverage by allowing devices to communicate with each other and back to the network. Those are the kind of things that we're really excited in expanding once we finished the immediate task of getting ready for this emergency services switch on.
So that was Mansoor Hanif, Director of the Radio Access Networks at EE, and with the Emergency Services Network coming into more and more prominence as we go forward in the critical communications industry, I think there's some really interesting points that that will remain and that we can still, and questions that we can still ask going forward. I think he obviously mentioned the fact that public safety are going to have access to the most advanced tools in the world on an LTE network, but what are those tools going to be and how are they actually going to impact public safety operations going forward? I think secondly that a subsequent impact of that is how is this going to change the critical communications ecosystem? How is it going to impact new companies coming into the ecosystem and into the community? And how are the current companies going to have to change and adapt going forward? We might have a situation that a critical communications world event in 10 years' time might look completely different to the one this year in Amsterdam. And thirdly, with all this data and increased amounts of data capture, how does this then affect the control room that has to then process, utilize, store, and ultimately keep secure this massive data flow? I think these are all points that are going to remain going forward for the next number of years in the critical communications industry, and I implore you to get involved in the discussion.